Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, May 7th. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. Today, we'll dive into a mystery. What happened to Tesla's once so lofty supercharging plans? And what does it mean for the rest of America's auto industry? And then, we're going to get into the next stage of Elon's free speech plan for X, reinstating Nick Fuentes, a white supremacist who's been banned from basically every social media platform. To go over all of this, and then some, we're joined by our usual superstar panel, Elon reporter Dana Hull. Hello, Dana.
Good afternoon.
And Businessweek senior writer and editor, Max Chafkin.
Hey, David.
Okay, so to be clear here, I know I said it's Tuesday, May 7th, but we're actually recording this a day earlier than normal on Monday because this is a special week for us. Elon Inc. is hitting the road. We'll be hosting a live taping on Thursday at the Bloomberg Tech Summit in San Francisco. Join us there. Links will be in the show notes. Dana Hull, let's get this started and talk about how Elon has done away with most or all of the supercharger team. We touched briefly on this last week, but the details keep coming out.
Yeah, so Elon Musk is reorganizing Tesla and kind of really reshaping the company to focus more on AI and autonomy. And as part of the layoffs that he has been doing for several weeks now, he completely disbanded the supercharging team that reported up to Rebecca Tanucci, who was one of the top female executives at the company. Tesla watchers will remember that she was one of the speakers at the Investor Day last year. And it was really surprising because supercharging, it's like this awesome product. I mean, I think I've even called it Tesla's shrewdest product. And it kind of comes at a time when all these other automakers like Ford and Rivian and GM had like signed on to adopt the Tesla charging network as their own. And all of this integration work was underway before the summer driving season. So a lot of it is very puzzling. If you believe in the idea that EV adoption is slowing and that sales are slowing, it makes sense to kind of throttle back your expansion plans. But it does not make sense to fire all 500 people who worked on that team, because now who does GM call? All the people that were facilitating these partnerships with other automakers are now gone.
So, Dana, the Tesla charging network is indeed very different than the charging networks that these other EV makers have. They're referred to as super charging stations. What makes exactly their stations different and better than those controlled by their rivals?
So I think the thing to really think about is Tesla doesn't just make cars. They really own the fueling infrastructure that is important for electric vehicle adoption. And they very early on knew that the key to getting people to drive electric vehicles was to make charging easy and seamless. And over a decade ago, they started building their own stations, and Elon Musk called them superchargers. And at first, there were 6 of them in California. And so you could drive from San Francisco to LA or San Francisco to Lake Tahoe. Now they are all over the world. They are in China. They are all over the United States. They are all over Europe. And they are really easy to use. And they are often located off of highways, near a place where you can stop and go get a cup of coffee. I mean, the one in Kettleman City, which is on the way to LA, is this amazing spot. It's open 24 hours. There's coffee there. You can get a latte. You can buy Tesla merchandise. And the supercharging network has always been seen as Tesla's value add, because Tesla is not just selling you a car. They also are basically owning and creating this fueling infrastructure. But now what's happened is that Musk is trying to cut 20% of his staff, and he cut this entire team. And, the superchargers still exist, but there are just a lot of questions as to who's going to maintain them and like what his whole strategy here is. My understanding is that the business unit was close to being profitable, but maybe if you're reconfiguring your whole company to be about autonomy and the robotaxi, maybe you don't need to build as many as you had originally planned.
Yeah, so if the business was close to being profitable, Max, I would have to have imagined that this is the kind of thing. You have a dominant position in that space, in the charging space, and for years, as more and more automakers go into EVs, like this could have been a thing that just threw off cash for decades to come, no?
You would think, building these superchargers and on a big scale and expanding the number that they have currently, that's also capitally intensive. And clearly, like Elon Musk has other areas where he wants to spend that money. He wants to spend that money buying, NVIDIA, H100s, these like GPU chips to train these AI models.
AI models for what?
Assumedly for the robotaxi, right? I should say the aspirational robotaxi, because there is no robotaxi yet, is going to use enormous resources. And Elon Musk, as Dan is saying, has been trying to reorient the company towards that. Tesla, before, when they were trying to come out with this $25,000 car or moving more aggressively to other models, Elon Musk really seemed to be betting on a lot more scale, right? Like more superchargers, lots of cars. And it really does seem like over the last few months, he's changed his thinking there, right? Where the company is not trying to drastically increase the number of EVs out there in the short term. It wants to essentially, get rid of the conventional car altogether. It's extremely, it's a bold bet. And it also seems like you're saying, like maybe it's a foolhardy decision to throw away or put the brakes on what has been a really good part of the company. But
to get rid of the conventional car altogether, do you still not need more charging stations? Or is the idea, Dana, that I guess if just a handful of robo-taxis are driving us all around, we need a limited number of cars?
So I think you have to really look at sales and EV adoption. And, Tesla had a terrible first quarter. They had like 46,000 more cars in inventory than they could sell. And so you don't need to keep building new superchargers if your sales are slowing. And Tesla has a lot of superchargers. As of the end of the first quarter, they had over 6,000 supercharging stations and more than 57,000 connectors worldwide. So you don't really need to build more. And what Musk said was, we're going to focus instead on optimizing our existing stations. That's all fine. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense is firing all the people who were overseeing relationships with other automotive partners like Ford, GM, and Rivian, because the whole idea was that, Tesla's network is the dominant network in the United States. And like Tesla got all of this money from the Biden administration through this program called the NEVI program, where under the Inflation Reduction Act, if you opened up the network to other automakers, you got federal funding. And so, Musk has never been one to kind of turn down the spigot of funding. So all of these NEVI projects that were supposed to be built using federal funds, I don't know where that stands. And frankly, I don't think anyone else does either, because all the people that oversaw the contracts are now gone.
Yeah, and Max, that's one of the things that jumps out at me a little bit here is when you're a small startup or a startup of any sorts, like Tesla was for a while, you can blow stuff up all the time and shut down departments and start other things. And, the broader ripples across the economy and across the broader industry are small. I wonder if right now it's almost a little bit like Tesla and Elon aren't realizing their own strength and might and power in this space. Is it they don't realize their strength or might or power, or they just simply don't care?
It's very hard to disentangle like Elon Musk's strategy in terms of like the business strategy of the business case for slowing down superchargers or firing the team, and then the management style, which is to these like grand gestures in which, you fire entire teams to prove a point. And my guess is it's probably a little bit of both, right? Like there's been some reporting suggesting that the person who's running that team was hesitant to like cut as deeply as Elon Musk wants. Elon Musk is trying to make this point that the company has to be extremely hardcore. I suppose.
And what better way to show that than to just sack that person and the entire team?
It seems crazy from the outside. And I'm sure if you're sitting, in Detroit and you've been counting on these superchargers, it seems crazy as well. It does conceivably, I think, hurt other EV makers to have Tesla slow this down, because of course this Tesla supercharger network was going to be an asset to the entire industry, and people who are buying a Hyundai or a Kia or a Ford or whatever were also going to benefit from these networks. You could see a situation where Elon Musk feels like, do I really want to be paying to build this massive infrastructure that is going to also be used by my competitors? Maybe I have this sort of modestly profitable thing, but like it doesn't serve the big goal, which is to be worth trillions of dollars and do all the crazy ambitious stuff that he wants to do.
Did they not hire anyone back? I thought they were hiring people back, or no?
There's rumors that they could hire people back. I mean, Elon Musk has changed his mind before. I'm reminded of in 2019, he announced that they were closing all the stores. And then once he realized actually we have long-term leases with all of these shopping malls, he kind of did an about face and they recanted. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to hire some people back. And I mean, to be clear, there are still people that are going to service the existing superchargers.
I recently, Max, was trying to drive from Miami south to Key West. My wife and I, we were trying to rent a Tesla. Avis had no Teslas for us. They gave us another EV, some fancy pants Mercedes EV. We said, okay, fine. It was not fully charged when they gave it to us, Dan. We said, fine. It had 47 miles. We're like, whatever, we'll find a charging station. We went by a zillion Tesla charging stations we had no access to, and then very quickly found ourselves down to just a handful of miles left. And at that point, we got to this charging station. There was nowhere else to go. We wound up waiting in a Walmart parking lot across, by the way, the road from a Murphy USA gas station where cars were just zipping in, filling up, zipping out. It took us 4 hours to charge.
Wow, that sounds like a great
It was awesome. It was awesome. And the thing that jumped out at me, though, Dana, was it wasn't just idiot tourists like us stuck in this position, and I do emphasize idiot tourists. They were also queuing up in the line behind us, waiting a half an hour, getting frustrated and driving off. There were also actual EV owners of Hyundais and Volkswagens.
Well, right. And that's why Tesla has had such an incredible advantage, because the superchargers work. And if you have the Tesla app on your phone, you can see where the nearest supercharger is and how many stalls are open. And you get very real time data on what your charging time is. And whenever I've rented a Tesla, I've used the superchargers. I've never had one problem with them. So that's why Tesla had such an advantage, and they really built the best team in the industry. All of these people are top flight talent. So now the market is flooded with 500 people, and every other charging network is going to try to snap them up and learn from their expertise. But that's what's so amazing. No one was able to replicate what Tesla did. And Tesla also has all this data about where you charge, which ones are the most used. They have just a ton of information about electricity pricing and real-time pricing and how much the average person charges. So I think the fact that Tesla is really throttling back what was this clear advantage at this pivotal time when EV adoption has very much slowed. It's caused ripple effects throughout the entire industry. And if you go on LinkedIn, oh my God, there's this uproar. Everyone in the charging business is trying to figure out what's going on.
Right. And they don't exactly know. But as far as we understand, the deal that will allow them and their cars to charge at these Tesla supercharging stations, it is not dead, correct?
It is not dead. I mean, I have not heard of any automakers backing out of the deal. I just think that how the onboarding and the integration and the billing all works is just up in the air, because all of the people who oversaw those details are now gone.
And it just feels like one of the ways in which these companies have not quite figured out how people are going to use EVs and how they're going to convince the kind of person who's watching, like you said, watching this giant line at a charging station on one side of the street and a gas station where dozens of cars are going in and out in 10
Max,
seconds.
It was amazing.
It seems like it's just not totally figured out yet. And that's a good reason if you're Elon Musk and you're worried about your spending and you think that there's this amazing target called, AI that you should be aiming for, you could sort of understand why you would want to try to cut back.
The other person I want to quote here while I waited in line forever at the charging station was somebody after they had finally finished charging and was clearly exhausted by the experience, just turned to me and said, "Is America ready for this?" I think the answer, at least right now, is looking like no. Okay, we're now going to talk about X and Elon's reinstatement of Nick Fuentes. And to help us do that, we've got Kurt Wagner, who covers X for us here at Bloomberg and is the author of the book, The Battle for the Bird, about Elon's takeover of Twitter. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Kurt, I think it was on Friday, Elon has reinstated, he made the decision to reinstate Nick Fuentes. Tell us, to get this started, who exactly is Nick Fuentes?
Yeah, Nick Fuentes is, I believe, about 25 years old. He's labeled a white supremacist, anti-Semite. He's basically a far-right sort of media personality. He's got his own talk show and he has a conference and he shows up sort of in the far-right circles of, folks who support basically Donald Trump and sort of came to light during Donald Trump's presidency. And so a few years ago, he was banned from what was then Twitter permanently.
So this is by the pre-Musk team.
That's right. This is, Twitter 1.0, if you want to call it that. And had still been banned on what is now X up until obviously just a couple days ago, even though Elon has brought back several other people. But he is now back. He went on a Twitter Spaces over the weekend with, it was quite the crew. I believe Alex Jones was there, Andrew Tate was there, Mario Nawfal, who's sort of like a, Elon, I don't know, fan, I guess.
He's like the Larry King of this world.
That's helpful.
Yeah, of Twitter Spaces.
A sort of journalist.
I was just checking before he hopped on. I believe that it's up to 1.8 million viewers or listens for that Spaces. So this crew, many of whom were suspended or banned on X until, Elon took over, now has quite the audience.
That's one of the things I was going to ask you, Kurt. So how many exactly controversial people has Elon reinstated since taking the company over a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I don't have the full number, but I did jot down a few examples because it's an interesting list. There's the obvious, President Trump, right, is the most high profile.
Although President Trump, ex-President Trump, he has been reinstated, but he has turned X down, right? He has not come back, actually.
Yeah, I believe he's only posted one time. He posted his mugshot, you may remember, and used it to try and fundraise. I do recall that. So ex-President Trump is the most high profile, but Nick Fuentes is one. We were talking about Alex Jones is obviously a very, notorious far-right personality that's been brought back. Andrew Tate is another. There was a guy, Ali Alexander, who, helped organize the Stop the Steal campaign. He was brought back, and I think he was actually re-suspended. I think Fuentes might have been as well. I think he and Ali Alexander were brought back in the very early days of Elon's takeover and then almost immediately suspended again. And now Fuentes is now getting to come back again for a second time under Elon.
So Max, what would you say? Where does Fuentes rank in terms of on the extremeness scale among those rehabilitated?
He's pretty far on the far end of the extremist scale. After the election of President Trump, you had a lot of the kind of quote unquote, remember the term alt-right. Those were the kind of online supporters of Trump and Trumpism. A lot of them kind of backed away from the movement or were banned or faded away or sort of embraced the fact that they were in power. And you had this kind of new wave of even further right personalities, of which Fuentes is probably like the most prominent example. The main target of his ire, besides, blacks and Jews and minorities of any kind and gay people, is the Republican Party and the right? It's like going after the mainstream for not being, pro-American, pro-white, whatever enough. And, we talked about this, and others have talked about this. One of the difficulties of operating a social network is like, where do you draw the line? And even if you're a free speech absolutists, there are going to be kinds of speech that are going to kind of mess up your network. And Musk too has kind of struggled with this.
He banned him, he unbanned him, and I guess, Kurt, to a certain extent, in his post rehabilitating him again, he kind of tries to sort of caveat it a bit. The post said, very well, he, Nick Fuentes, will be reinstated, provided he does not violate the law, and let him be crushed by the comments and community notes.
Yeah, this sort of aligns with what Elon has said in a few different situations. Sunlight is the best disinfectant kind of thing, right? And his point here is like, instead of letting these terrible viewpoints kind of fester away hidden, let's let them out in the open and everyone can see how terrible they are.
And is that working, Kurt Wagner?
I don't think that's sort of ever worked, right? Especially the way social media works. The people who have the most extreme viewpoints often find their communities, and people get empowered by that. They get radicalized by that. They get excited about it. And the fact that this space yesterday with that crew I mentioned got 1.8 million viewers sort of tells the story, right?
It's a big group of people in terms of numbers, but as a percentage of the population and so on, it's small. And like, that's kind of the problem, is that like this belief system, the, white supremacy, or in the case of Alex Jones, it's, conspiracy theorizing, like, it is not and never is going to be a mainstream anything. And so the more time Elon Musk spends, it clearly seems like this is taking up a huge part of his, mind space. It almost, looking at his X page, it almost seemed like he was sort of badgered into doing this, or, there were a lot of replies from Fuentes's, allies and so on, suggesting that he do this. It's like he's off in a corner that he's making the, far right very happy. And meanwhile, like, X itself continues to sort of go sideways, right? This is not going to address any of the big problems that X has.
Yeah, Dana, to that point, there is a sort of, or seems to be something of a spur of the moment, not necessarily super well thought out element to this decision. A little bit of like, I guess this is the way Elon always rolled at Tesla when he was tweeting there, right? It's not necessarily all been properly vetted and such.
Yeah, I mean, I think Elon makes impulsive decisions, and, the fanboys are like, oh, he's playing 4D chess or 5D chess. And it's like, no, he's just like, he's just like, whatever. He's just impulsive. He's tweeting. He's on his plane. Like, he's just following his gut. And I don't think that we should read too much into it. I mean, I think that fundamentally he wants X to be, like the water cooler, and he wants engagement. And like, everyone who covers social media knows that like anger drives a lot of engagement. Mm-hmm. So even if you think that Nick Fuentes is like a horrible person, you still click on the tweets or read the tweets or quote tweet the tweets to show how awful they are. And that's still driving engagement. So I think that that's a big part of it. I mean, he is courting the right, but also just really trying to drive up his numbers. And Kurt, I don't even know what metric he's using now. Is it like unregrettable user minutes? Is it? He's like making up all these new metrics.
Whoa! What is that?
Unregretted user minutes.
Oh, and so and vis-a-vis regretted? Like, what is that? How does that work?
Well, that's sort of the thing. No one really knows. Like, what is an unregrettable user minute? It's not a metric that I've ever heard. I've covered social networks for 10 years, many that have failed along the way. I've never heard that statistic before. But that's sort of the idea, right? And I guess I would echo just really quickly what Dana said about the impulsiveness. When Elon first took over Twitter, and book plug here, I covered this in the book, but like, he shows up, and the battle for the bird about the Twitter takeover. And when he shows up, there were employees who were really excited to work with like this visionary, right? This guy that they thought was going to, fix everything, and were shocked to find out how frequently it seemed like he was just flying by the seat of his pants and sort of making these decisions on a whim. And so I think it's very possible that the Fuentes reinstatement falls into that same bucket.
Not good for the business.
So obviously, if you're trying to lure back mainstream advertisers, probably not so good. And CEO Linda Yaccarino is probably not loving that. But Kurt, as Dana was just saying, he has the rehabilitation of Nick Fuentes has given the thing a jolt of customer engagement. I guess that Twitter Spaces, that X Spaces had You were saying like 1.7 million people tuned in. Is that not monetizable some way, somehow?
Well, it is monetizable, but not all traffic is created equal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's number one, who are you reaching? And number two, what is in I think Twitter's case, what is the risk of reaching those people, right? And so if you're an advertiser going to X, you have to say, okay, maybe there is an audience here that would be great to reach, but at what cost, right? The cost is that you're doing business with Elon, who is openly, supporting and platforming a white supremacist or several white supremacists, right? And so the trade-off for a lot of brands, I think, is that, well, yeah, sure, there are people there we'd like to reach, but they're not worth reaching if it means, we have to associate with what X has sort of become. And I think that is the bigger issue, is that there's a lot of discomfort around what Elon has become, what Elon is starting to represent, and what they would sort of be labeling themselves as advertisers on that platform.
This is not like news to anyone who follows media industry, but, it's dangerous for advertisers in two ways. One is that, someone sees a ad for like Campbell's Soup next to a Nick Fuentes, racist meme or something, and that's embarrassing to the advertiser. The other is that advertisers, care a lot about who they're reaching, right? And they want like C-suite executives. They want people with influence, with huge amounts of disposable income, with long-term plans to spend that money. Nick Fuentes is a self-described incel. He is, that's an involuntary celibate. That's somebody, it's a sort of subset of the men's rights movement. When you look at like who his audience is, it is like the opposite of what a normal corporate advertiser wants. Like it's just completely, if not counterproductive, it's very close to it. And to the extent that Elon Musk is using the name Nick Fuentes, responding to people talking about Nick Fuentes, it's bad, right?
It may be engagement, but it's not the kind of engagement they want.
It's the opposite of the kind of engagement they want.
I found it interesting that he's sort of like, hey, we may lose advertisers over this. It isn't going to be good for business. To me, it's almost cover at this point, right? Like, they're already losing advertisers. It's already a bit of a bad
once
business.
You get to zero, I guess it's hard to go like,
Yeah, now he has something to point to, right? He can say like, well, business is bad because I'm supporting free speech over here. And it's like, well, business was kind of already bad, but this might just be, an added example.
Okay, so Kurt, there was other news over the weekend, which is that Jack Dorsey, formerly the head of X, Twitter at the time, he's left the Blue Sky board, and he's now praising X again. Remind us again what exactly Blue Sky was, and how do we interpret all of this?
Sure. Yeah, Blue Sky, it's a little bit tough to understand, but the simplest explanation is it's a social network that looks and feels very much like Twitter, but it is, decentralized. So this idea that it is not owned by any single company or any single investor, in theory, would never go out of business so long as, someone's paying to keep the servers running. And the idea started while Jack Dorsey was still at Twitter as a way to sort of create a, solution to the fact that these companies are beholden to, investors, or they're beholden to advertisers, or all these things where they have to make a business decision that, means they might have to kick someone like Nick Fuentes off the platform. That kind of stuff bothered Jack Dorsey. So he said, hey, let's create a different network that doesn't have any owner, that has none of these pressures around Wall Street. It's not publicly traded. And, that can be sort of the solution to all of this stuff. And he funded it while he was at Twitter. He joined the board after he left Twitter. And now he's sort of, as far as I can tell, abandoning this idea, at least this version of this idea, and has started to, I saw him posting on X quite a bit over the weekend.
Max, you seem to have a theory.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like there were all these ideas about sort of who's going to take the mantle after, Elon Musk. When Elon Musk was firing, 80% of his staff.
At Twitter.
At Twitter, now X, and doing all these things that seemed somewhat destructive to the brand, like letting the likes of Nick Fuentes on. And, it just seems like Twitter, even a reduced Twitter, even a Twitter that has been somewhat taken over by crypto shillers or weird, alt-right types or whatever. It's still Twitter, and baby Jack Dorsey, just like the rest of us, he just can't get off of it. Even if he knows, he knows in his heart that there's a better thing out there. It's just it has a pull on him.
We're going to go into our final segment. Max, we're going to have you break down and analyze critically some advice that Elon had for J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter. Max?
Well, J.K. Rowling, as many people know, in addition to being the best-selling author of Harry Potter and a bunch of Harry Potter spin-offs, has for some time now been on something of a kind of anti-woke kick, has posted many posts about what she sees as sort of overreach in terms of trans rights. And many people feel like she's expressed, bigoted, anti-trans statements. She's been sort of fighting this battle on social media for some time. And more or less out of nowhere, Elon Musk replied to one of her tweets. It was like a month-old tweet suggesting that she might want to try posting sort of more positive content.
The exact eeks was from Elon was, while I heartily agree with your points regarding sex and gender, may I suggest also posting interesting and positive content on other matters.
It's weird how a guy who just types mostly memes and one word things will then suddenly string a sentence that almost seems like it was written by, ChatGPT or something. But anyway, as you can imagine, David, when I saw this, I had one thought, which was feud.
God, Dana, he can't help himself. This guy sees feuds everywhere. Okay. Dana, if he's going to take this into feud territory, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it. I just think it's so funny that Musk is now the tone police. Mr. Free Speech is tone policing J.K. Rowling.
This was Grok doing his.
Why? And is he trying to steal thunder from the bigger beef of the weekend, which, let's face it, is really Drake and Kendrick and Lamar? That was the beef that everyone on the internet was paying attention to.
But Max, we stole the mic from you, so we're going to give it back. You were saying,
as I said, this is, I'd say it's a very delicate form of criticism, but as Dana says, coming from Elon Musk, kind of crazy for a guy who eeks his 7,000 times
for
a day,
guy who had
mostly about culture war stuff.
For a guy who the SEC had signed a Twitter sitter to vet supposedly every single eeks he made. So, yeah.
Also, okay, so J.K. Rowling did sort of respond. The following day, she did another post with a profile of hers, and it said something like, "Some people have suggested I need to post more positive material.
Screw you."
This is not a response to that, but everyone who's watching knows, of course, shots fired. We're basically going straight to a Kendrick situation, and then Elon quickly de-escalated. He actually then posted later something to the effect of J.K. Rowling is awesome. It seems like he realized all of a sudden he was not ready to, beef with the world famous best-selling author of Harry Potter.
No, I see. So it's not a feud.
It was a feud. Well, on my feud power ranking, which I maintain, it is at number 10. So it's at the very bottom of the power ranking.
Climbing up the leaderboard,
But I'm keeping it on there because you just never know where these things are going to go.
Kirk, to wrap up here, do we think this is a bit of a window into the new Elon on X, that periodically he's going to want to try to play the hey, let's moderate tone guy, or no, this is just some random one-off?
I think it's a random one-off. I mean, this is all coming within 24 hours of him, bringing back a pretty well-known white supremacist, right? So it's like he can't really be the guy who's setting the tone on Twitter and telling people to clean up their act and hey, let's be a little more positive, and then at the same time bring back the guy who is all about white Christianity and think that those things are going to be fine. So I don't know. I don't really see this as any more than just maybe someone sent it. Someone maybe tagged him. He came across it randomly and chimed in and moved on with his day.
And he was in a particularly mellow mood at the time.
Geez, there's a lot of controversial content on this platform. It does feel like it's an attempt to correct, right? It's my guess is he spent a lot of time, letting this white supremacist on the platform, and maybe is trying to do something to nod at the fact that, there are other kinds of content beyond controversial content. And especially, it would be much better if J.K. Rowling was talking about wizards all day on Twitter rather than, beefing with the left.
Very good. So, listeners, you heard that Max mentioned a power ranking. Yes, it's true. He is now compiling. He spends hours and hours and hours a week compiling, poring over his feud power rankings. We are not ready to release them to America yet, but they are coming soon. So you will have to stay tuned for that. Max, Dana, Kurt, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure.
Great to be here.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Naomi Shavin and Rehan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rehan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and we get special editing assistance from Jeff Grocott. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you in San Francisco.